Bringing people and communities together on seclosounds.org.
Your listening station.
Hello dear listener and welcome to the Guinn Travel Show on seclosounds.org. It's definitely a show of contrast today. I'll be speaking to Parr from the Botswana Tourist Board about what Botswana can offer the visitor, and I'll also be speaking to Simon Wilkinson about skiing and snowboarding in general and what the snow zone in Milton Keynes can offer in particular. Simon and the feature on winter sports comes in the second half of the show, which will be followed by a little bit of travel news. But first, let's get straight into my chat I had with Parr from Botswana Tourist Office about Botswana, and we started off with this, the basics of a little bit of history and how to get there.
Dawn, whereabouts is Botswana?
Botswana is in southern Africa. It's really in the centre of the subcontinent, and we're surrounded by South Africa, Namibia, Zimbabwe and Zambia. So we don't have a coastline.
Mm-hmm. Is it split into any regions?
I wouldn't say regions as such, although we do have different habitats. There are really 5 different landscapes, is what I would say,
okay.
Which are very different from each other. So some are very watery and some are very dry. Mm-hmm. And it's quite an interesting difference to go and visit many of the different types.
What's the brief history of Botswana?
This is actually quite interesting. Botswana, up until the mid-1800s, was one of the poorest nations in Africa. They lived in a tribal system, and the main industry was beef cattle.
Right.
At the end of the 1800s, the Boers from southern Africa were trying to take over the country of Botswana, which incidentally then was called Bechuana land. Mm-hmm. And the 3 main chiefs from the country decided that they wanted some help. So they got on a boat and they sailed all the way to the UK, bearing in mind this is 1880, and they sought an audience with Queen Victoria. And when they had their audience with her, they asked her to protect the country. And so Bechuana land, as it was then, became a British protectorate. They were never a colony as such, they were a protectorate. And that went right the way through until the 1960s, when in 1966 they decided to ask for independence. And we granted them independence, and their first president was a gentleman called Seretse Khama. And since then they have developed because they found diamonds. So very luckily they became quite a rich nation now.
Diamonds, that's very lucky.
It is incredibly lucky, seeing as it was the year after they got their independence from us. So
maybe it wouldn't have happened if it was the year before. Who knows?
Well, you do wonder, but to be fair, they've really used the money from diamonds very, very successfully. Mm-hmm. The government has put all of the money they get from diamonds back into the country. And so all of the people of Botswana now have free education, free health care. They've managed to put money into road structures and, other infrastructure. And so it's actually been developed in a very, very good way. So
you don't often hear that, do you, when diamonds get discovered?
Exactly right. And I think it's just really down to the government, who were very keen that they should share the money with the people of Botswana. And so, everyone is well educated and, has opportunities, which is a really great thing to hear of Africa.
Yes, I already sound like I want to emigrate there. You mentioned there's 5 different, not regions, but types of areas, landscapes. But what's the climate like?
The climate is very good, really. If you bear in mind, down south, they're obviously the opposite way round to us. So they have their winter during the months of sort of May to September. Mm-hmm. And during those months, it's very, very dry. The temperature does drop, particularly at night. It can go to even minus. So it can be -1, -2. During the day in those months, it'll be around about sort of 20 to 25 degrees, that is. Mm-hmm. And during their winter months, their summer months, that's me getting it wrong. During their summer months,
Yep.
it's which is sort of October through to February or March. It tends to be very, very hot. Can go up to sort of 35 degrees during the day. And it's also their rainy season.
So you're best off going in their winter season?
To be honest, any time of the year is a good time of year
Yep.
to go. Most people are obviously going there for a safari.
Mm-hmm.
And for a safari, you want to see the wildlife. So when it's very, very dry, that's a great time because the animals need to come in to drink water from the water holes.
Yep.
But people who are like birds, the birders, the actual months between November and February are really, really good because all the migrant birds come down to Africa to breed. It's also an interesting time because that's when all the antelope and all the other animals are having their babies.
Mm-hmm.
So sad to say, it's also a great time to see predators, the lions and the cheetah and things like that, who are obviously following the antelope herds.
Okay. We'll get on to safaris in a little bit
Yep.
in a while, but how long does it take to get to there from the UK, and is there a direct flight?
Sadly, there isn't a direct flight from the UK at the moment. The main way people go is either via Johannesburg or Cape Town. It's about a 12-hour flight to either of those from London.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's about an hour, between an hour to 2 hours flight into Botswana, depending on which exact destination you go to.
I guess it's kind of like getting to Namibia, I guess.
Almost identical to getting to Namibia.
Is it really on the British Safari Watchers radar, or is it an emerging country?
To be honest, it is on the radar of people who really like safaris.
Mm-hmm.
Most people would say it's the ultimate safari destination, but we've tried to keep it a little bit quiet. We restrict the number of people who can go to Botswana by restricting the number of beds available.
Mm-hmm.
So very few people actually get to go, which makes it also quite an exclusive destination. And I think once you go to Botswana on safari, you probably won't want to go anywhere else.
So you've got restrictions on the beds.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other entry requirements, such as visas?
No, all EU nationals don't need a visa to get there. The only thing you do need is to have 2 clear pages in your passport so that they can obviously stamp it.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, no restrictions whatsoever.
There's a length of expiry date on the passport, 6 months or...
It is 6 months, but they don't take that quite so literally, I have to say.
Okay.
It's better if you have got 6 months, but it's not absolutely necessary.
As long as you've got your 2 clear pages.
Exactly.
I've been to Kenya and I've had to have a few jabs. Are there any jabs and other medication that's required before you go?
No, we're very, very lucky. You don't need any inoculations or jabs at all. Obviously, I'd recommend that people have the normal ones you'd have for the UK,
Yep.
the sort of tetanus and things like that. The only thing we do have is it is a malarial zone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's best to check with your doctor or your GP before you go to exactly what malaria tablets you'll need to take.
That's good. I wish I'd known that. I would have gone there instead of Kenya. It was like a pincushion by the time they finished.
I know some of the African countries can be quite difficult, can't they? But we're very, very fortunate that we don't have any of those nasty diseases at the moment.
I had to have yellow fever and I'm ashamed to say I fainted. Yeah, a big guy like me and I collapsed, but never mind. It lasts 10
It's
years.
the needles, you know.
Yeah, I think it was just one needle too many.
Mm.
You mentioned it as a British protectorate.
Yep.
Does that mean English is one of the official languages, or is there other languages?
Yeah, English is the official language, so everybody in Botswana speaks English, which makes it nice and easy for us to go visit. But the local language is something called Setswana,
Mm-hmm.
and you will hear that spoken amongst the locals. There's also a Bushman click language, so if you're lucky enough to make a visit and go and visit the Bushmen, you'll just hear them talking in a range of clicks, which they make obviously with their mouths, and it's very fast language, but I've no idea what they say.
I'll have to check Rosetta Stone and see if they do a course on it. Is it easy to get around once you're there?
Definitely. Most people who go there don't want to do a self-drive or do it themselves. So you would normally go with a company, and they will take you around. Because of the vast distances, Botswana is about the size of France, so that means it's quite a large country. And to get to between the different areas, most people will actually fly using quite small planes. So between each. But it's very easy. It's all laid on. It's all organised. So not a problem at all.
Didn't realise it was that big.
Absolutely.
I've got a long question now. Loads of questions in one.
Okay.
Botswana's apparently 38% of it is national parks.
Yep.
Does it mean it's just a safari destination? If there is safari parks, how many are there? What size are they? And are there any other must-sees and do's? There you go. A long question.
A long question. I shall try and keep your answer short then. Yes, Botswana has 38% of the country as national parks. The government decided that they wanted to protect the wilderness and the wildlife, and so nobody is allowed to destroy the habitats. Botswana is a safari destination because as of 1966, when they got independence, there really was nothing else there. So they don't have any historic buildings or archaeological sites as such. So it really is a safari destination. There are 5 major parks. The one that most people will have heard of is the Okavango Delta, which is up in the northwest of the country. It's a water destination and has all the big 5 there. The other ones are the Central Kalahari Game Reserve, right in the middle of the country, a desert destination. The Makharakari Salt Pans. Don't ask me to spell that one.
Don't ask me to say it.
Which basically is one of the largest salt pans in the world. There's the Chobe National Park, which is where we have most of our elephants. Botswana has over 155,000 elephants in the country, and around 60,000 of those are in the Chobe National Park. And the other one really is the Kalahari Transfrontier Park, which crosses the border between us and South Africa. And you can go in between both countries inside the park without having to do any of the immigration requirements.
Okay, that sounds a bit unusual.
It was actually one of the first transfrontier parks set up in Africa. And as I say, it means you can go in on one side in one country, travel all around the park, crossing over the border, and as long as you come back out the same way as you went in, you don't have to do any of the immigration. If you go out the other side in the other country, then you will have to.
Okay. That's okay then. You mentioned elephants and predators.
Yep.
What sort of... Can you see the big 5 there?
Yeah, we do actually have all the big 5. Most of them, all 4 except for rhino, are very easy to see. In most of the parks you'll see those. Rhino are much more difficult. Botswana's been through a program of looking after their rhino, trying to breed them, and we're now into reintroducing them into the wild. So there are a number of rhino out there in the wild, but because, as I said, it's such a huge country and there's quite a few of them at the moment, you're very, very lucky if you do see them. But if you really want to, we do have a rhino sanctuary, so people can actually go to the rhino sanctuary, and all the rhinos are out there loose in the wild. They're not in pens or anything. And so you drive around the rhino sanctuary and you can actually see them a bit closer to, and probably more guaranteed.
Yeah. Do you get to see any breeding program when you're there?
You do get to see the babies. What they've actually done is let the rhino do their natural thing, to be fair. So they are quite successful because they've got a large number of rhinos there. And so, I mean, certainly when I've been there, I've seen a number of the babies. But they don't kind of have them penned in or anything like that while they're doing the breeding bit.
Okay, so you can't go up and cuddle a baby then.
But I think it's probably not a good idea. They have incredibly long horns.
Yeah, my wife would be the sort of person to rush up towards one. She does like them.
They're amazing and huge. I mean, it's actually quite surprising when you see one close up how big it really is. A bit the same as elephants. You never realise how big an elephant is until you see it close up.
No, or until you see it go to the toilet, he said, lowering the tone.
The Drive Time Show with Nigel G every Monday to Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. online at seclosounds.org. The best mix of music and fun to wind down your day. Listen out for a slice of cheese, the rotten tomato, and remember the beans. Intrigued? Don't miss the Drive Time Show with Nigel G every Monday to Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. on seclosounds.org.
You're listening to the John Guinn Travel Show on seclosounds.org. You can contact the show via facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show. Now for the concluding part of my chat I had with Dawn about Botswana, and we start off by seeing if there's any natural wonders to see.
You said there wasn't much in Botswana because of the history, but are there any natural wonders to see?
Apart from, I mean, they don't have any natural wonders like huge waterfalls or things like that. It's a very flat country.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that there are actually two things I would say that people should really, really try and see. One is the Okavango Delta. It's now a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Yep.
And it's a huge, huge area. The only place in the world where a river runs inland, which is a strange phenomena anyway. But it starts off as a big river and ends up in smaller and smaller rivers, streams, and then into marshland. And it's absolutely beautiful. The other thing, which is not a natural wonder in itself, but is somewhere called Sedillo Hills, which is near to the Okavango Delta. And it's a series of hills which were, and still are, sacred to the Bushmen. And you can see lots and lots of rock paintings, so very ancient rock paintings that were done by, the ancient Bushmen years and years ago. And that's really quite impressive to see.
Do they keep a close guard on how many people go wandering around there?
They certainly do. You're only allowed to go on a walk round there with a guide.
Mm-hmm.
But that's actually really useful because some of the paintings are actually hidden under rocks and things like that. So if you were to go on your own, you probably wouldn't see them all anyway. And the guides are trained so that they can explain to you the differences between the types of paintings and what they actually depict. It's a bit of a strenuous walk, and particularly if it's really hot, it can get quite tough. But it really is very well worth seeing.
City visits. Is there a city to visit?
Yes, we have the capital city, which is probably the one that most tourists would want to see.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Gaborone, and is in the south of the country. It's a fairly new town, obviously, or new city, but has some amazing futuristic buildings, which they've built for the government buildings and hospitals and things like that. It's a pretty international in standards, so there are international type hotels. There's obviously cinemas and shops and casinos and all of those kind of things. And there's a really excellent museum there which discusses all the heritage of Botswana and has lots of artifacts from days gone by.
I read there's somewhere called Francistown. Is there anything that people see there?
Francistown is a much smaller town, and it's really an industrial town. So more people go there for business than anything else. It's also one of the nearest towns to our border with Zimbabwe. And so it's quite often a stopping off point if people are driving themselves, through from Zimbabwe into Botswana. But I wouldn't suggest it's necessarily a tourist destination.
No. Okay, then I'll cross that one off my list. What's the minimum length of stay that you would recommend for someone?
Goodness. The minimum length, I would say, is really 10 days. You need to see several of the different parks to get the difference between, say, the Okavango, the water park, and the Kalahari, which is completely desert. and also to go and see the salt pans. And as I said before, it's a big country, so you've got to allow time to travel between them. And so I would say 10 days is a real minimum. If you want to see pretty much everything, then I would suggest you need almost 3 weeks. That's a nice sort of length of time to go.
Okay, 3 weeks. That's down on my list too. You mentioned about the restrictions of number of beds and people coming in to visit. Does that mean DIY travel isn't really possible and you're best off going for a travel agent or tour operator?
DIY travel is fine. I mentioned self-drive. I mean, people do self-drive around Botswana. All I would say on that is if it's your first visit, the roads, most of the main roads are great. You know, tarred roads, no problem at all. But through the parks, there are obviously no roads really at all. It's all sand or dirt roads. And if you're not used to driving on those, it can be quite challenging. Plus, you're probably concentrating on your driving rather than spotting the wildlife that's out there.
Yep.
And if you haven't got a guide with you, then we don't see things as well as the guides do, I have to say. So you're likely to miss a lot. As far as DIY, should I put the holiday together myself? That's really easy. There are lots and lots of companies in Botswana who you can book with direct, both travel agents who will, you know, put something together for you, or you can get in touch with the lodges and the camps and things direct, and they will put things together as well. One of the things that I think is really exciting to do in Botswana is something we call mobile safari. Yep. Which is where you join a group, or you do it as individuals, and the camp moves with you. So you're not having to pack up all the time and sit in an airport and wait for the next flight. You're actually traveling throughout your trip. It's a bit different from overland because they stop and put a camp up every couple of days, and you stay there for a couple of days and go out and do the activities from there. But and camping in Botswana is not two-man tent Boy Scout camping. We have luxury tents with ensuite facilities and proper beds. So it really is the kind of height of luxury, but you're out there under canvas, at one with nature, which is really quite exciting.
I imagine the night sky is pretty outstanding as well when you're there.
In some of the places, the Central Kalahari and the Makharakari salt pans, the sky goes literally from horizon to horizon. It's just the best thing ever. I'm a big astronomer, and you can just lie out, in your camp bed, looking up at the stars, trying to work out what everything is. So it is amazing.
Yeah, I do like that.
Would have been great fun to see the shooting stars that we had in the UK recently down there, I think, if they'd have been there. But something like that would be really stunning.
Yeah, I was in Kenya, and we saw a satellite go over, and we were getting excited, and the locals thought we were nuts because they see it all the time.
I suppose we have so much light pollution here in the UK that anywhere like that, where it is absolutely pitch black, is just unbelievable.
It's worth going just for that, I think. You mentioned the roads are tarmacked. Are they safe?
Absolutely. Botswana is a really, really safe country. I'm more than happy to go there on my own and travel around on my own. I drive myself about all the time. So single travellers, ladies, couples, it's all incredibly safe. Obviously, you do have, and that's safe from people, I should say. Of course, you do have to be very careful about the wildlife. It is their land, and you need to follow rules and regulations about where you can stop, where you can get out, how to deal with an elephant in your path and things like that. We want to make sure everyone who comes there is very safe and gets home safely. So you just have to watch out for the wildlife.
Watch out for the wildlife. Are there any big events planned over the rest of this year and next year?
Botswana has lots of events. A lot of them tend to be arts and culture. So there are basket exhibitions, dance festivals, all of those kind of things. I think I would say you probably missed the major event that we have, which is the Kalahari Desert Race, which is, it's a bit like the Sahara Desert Race, where the vehicles travel across.
Yep.
We have an event like that, which is actually held in July, and will be held again in July next year. So if people are interested in Cars and racing across deserts and things like that, that's a good one to come for. But other than that, it tends to be much more local. So each city or each town will have their dance festival or their basket weaving exhibitions, all of those kind of things.
And finally, how can the listeners find out more?
If anyone's interested in going to Botswana, after all I've said, the best place to find out is from our website, which is www.botswanatourism.org.uk.
Once again, the website is www.botswanatourism.org.uk. And I will be putting the link up onto my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show. You'll just have to face it, dear listener. Summer is now over. It's time to look ahead to the winter and what you want to do during the colder months. To find out more about winter sports, more particularly skiing and snowboarding, I popped in to see Simon Wilkinson, an instructor at the Snow Zone in Milton Keynes. I'll start off by asking him whether or not the snowboarding and skiing scene is for younger people and the skiing is for older. And he told me that's not necessarily the case. When you start snowboarding, you're restricted to the width of the boards. It has to be roughly the size of your feet. And it's very difficult to get hold of boards for younger children. So you have to be around about 7 when you start snowboarding. But you can start skiing at 3. So to be perfectly honest, children are starting to ski and then moving into snowboarding. Also, people think that snowboarding is a lot hipper than skiing, but it's not the case because Britain has now got its own world champion in freestyle skiing, James Wood, which means he can do tricks coming down a hill on skis, sort of tricks he used to only do on a board. So a lot of the fun and games from the snowboarding scene is moving into the skiing scene. The interview was recorded in a small room at the Snow Zone, and the sound does go a little bit ropey every now and again, but please do bear with it because there's a lot of important and interesting information during the sessions I had with Simon. And now we're going to start off by talking about where's an ideal place to snowboard. What's the ideal snowboarding location?
I think snowboarders tend to like locations where there are very few paths. Now, whenever you're away on a ski holiday, you'll find in any mountain, there are access paths that get you from one area to the next area or from one slope to the next slope. For skiers, that's not too bad because they have ski poles, they can push themselves along, but you'll find boarders much prefer to find areas where there are fewer paths and more kind of slight declines and slopes that they can go down because paths are quite difficult for boarders to get along.
What equipment is required, or is it best to have your own kit, or is it okay to hire it? And finally, is there any maintenance you should do each day if you're snowboarding regularly?
Yeah, I think with regard to kit, the first piece of kit that anyone should really buy is a pair of boots, because the boots will often be shaped to the individual's feet. Whenever you rent a pair of boots, you'll find that they've been shaped by the people that have been in those boots before, and that can be any number of individuals. So I would always say to someone who's buying kit, aim for boots first, because they're going to give you a greater level of comfort and ultimately enjoyment on your holiday. With regard to kit itself, it can be quite expensive, so I would say to people, if you look like you're going to do the sport in the long term, then buy it because it will be an investment and it will require some maintenance, maybe once a week, doing a little bit of waxing to keep the board fresh and a little bit of edging to keep the edges of the board sharp. But if you're not going to be doing it that regularly, maybe going once a year, every couple of years, then you might like to hire it because it saves you having to carry the board out to the mountains and back again, and it also will mean that you'll be able to hire something relatively new every time, which means you'll be updating yourself or keeping up to date with the changes in the kit as well by hiring it from the rental shop with their newest provision, if you like.
You mentioned edging. What's that?
So edging is where the snowboard, or skis in fact, they have metal edges down the side of them, and those are designed for gripping against the snow. Now, of course, you get different snow conditions, so you'll find that when the snow is firmer or a bit icier, you need your edges to be sharp in order for it to grip against the snow, and that's what's going to ultimately stop you or help you to change direction, so it creates a resistance against the snow. The sharper the edges, the better it will be at achieving that task, in theory.
In theory, okay. How easy is it to learn to be safe on a board?
I think with any sport you'll find there's an element of risk, and I think with skiing and snowboarding the biggest risk is for people to go into the sport without a level of training or education. As ski and snowboard instructors, our job is to help people to learn in a very safe environment, which is our number one priority. What we're trying to do is to create an environment and create a set of tasks that are within someone's ability but developing them all the time and doing so safely. There is always going to be an element of risk, but we find those risks are massively increased when people aren't in the company of a qualified and experienced instructor.
So don't just hop on the board?
No, absolutely not.
What about tricks? What's a good one to start with?
I think for snowboarding and for skiers, the best way to start your tricks is to do it without using any features, so no jumps, no rails to start with. Tricks are great for helping you to balance and to be able to manoeuvre the board or the skis. So I would say the first thing that you want to learn is how to do small jumps and ollies, but doing it on flat land. And then from there you can start to look at doing flat land 180s, which would be a spin to face in the other direction, or even flat land 360s, which you can do. You just need a little bit of tuition, I think, for most people to get their head around how that would work, doing a full 360 spin without anything to jump off. But they are great ways of getting used to balancing on the board.
I'm assuming that doing the 360 you really need your boots to be good for you.
Yeah, obviously having the right kit is really going to help. That's not to say that you couldn't do it in any rental kit or borrowed kit, but I would say that it is going to be so much more comfortable whatever you do in your own equipment.
If somebody only goes snowboarding on a holiday, is there any risk of muscle injury?
Yeah, I think there always is with any sport. I think what people forget when they look at skiing and snowboarding is that it's a sport you might do for 6 or 7 hours a day, and that's a great deal of time. For me, I would say to anybody doing the sport, make sure you warm up effectively before you start. And what that means is it doesn't mean necessarily, kind of doing a couple of runs just to ease yourself into it, but actually physically warming yourself, so getting the blood pumping around the body, waking up body and mind, because you will need to think about what you're doing, and then to do some dynamic stretching, which is not standing there and pulling the muscles into a stretch and holding them for a second, but to do things like leg swings that gently stretch the muscle and prepare it for exercise. What you'll find is when people do the other type of stretching, static stretching, where you've seen people on a football field holding these stretches for a couple of minutes, the muscle actually responds to that by shortening immediately after, which actually can increase the risk of injury. So it's really important to go through the right routine before you start.
What about the weeks leading up to the holiday? Should they do any exercises to strengthen their joints?
Yeah, absolutely. The research suggests that whenever you start a routine of exercise, be it a strength conditioning program, so that's your kind of gym resistance weights, or whether it's going and doing sprints in a field, the first response is actually to increase the fluid around the joints, to allow the joints to move in a more fluid manner, for want of a turn of phrase. That in itself will help with going out and doing such large quantities of exercise on the hill. But there is no greater gain you will make to your skiing and your snowboarding than actually having a high level of fitness and strength. Those things alone will really help someone to achieve the most out of their holiday. And actually, from being an instructor, I've found that you'll get people from other sports who may be very good sportsmen in other sports, and they're just capable of brazening it through all their learning because they're strong enough to just give everything a go. Very interesting to see them achieving a great deal, but not necessarily being the most technically accurate. They're just strong enough to achieve it, so it does help.
Somebody sits on a couch like me all day, I shouldn't go straight into it, then I should exercise.
I think yeah, if you're going to do it, it'd be worth you spending a little bit of time warming up for that holiday. I mean, if you imagine going on a football training camp and spending 6 hours a day for 5 days or 6 days on a camp, you'd probably be quite fatigued by the end of it, and I think that in itself will increase the risk of injury.
Listen to the Sticks Radio Show with me, Terry Sullivan, here on Seklo Sounds every Monday from 10 a.m. with guests from the world of entertainment and sport across hearts, beds and bucks. The Sticks Radio Show, online at seklosounds.org.
You mentioned earlier about doing 6 or 7 hours up on the slopes. Is that people are going to be determined to get the most out of their holiday? Day one, is that really a realistic amount of time to spend up there?
Yes, it is if you've done the right preparation. And I think that goes back to our previous question. If you've done the right preparation, then by all means go out for 6 hours. But what I would do is I would take note of your fatigue levels. I would be especially cautious after your big lunch that's probably going to be full of cheese for most people when they get their first day in the Alps. And I would, at that stage, I'd be thinking to myself, what do I really want to achieve after lunch? Because that's when your body's committing a lot of energy to digesting all the food you've had. And it's probably not as awake, and you may have had 1 or 2 glasses of wine as well with your lunch. So that's the stage where you'll find that the P-sters are busiest. And these are the guys that are out there picking up the people that have injured themselves on the hill. So they normally, between 2 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon is when they've got to do the majority of their work. So there is evidence to suggest that that's the time that people might increase the risk of injury. So I would say to anyone, on your first day on your holiday, warm up effectively, spend the day getting to know the resort and getting to know the areas that you're going to be skiing most. And that should really be your main target, because then you'll know when you go out there on the second day and you start to increase the intensity, you're going to know what's coming on the runs, you're going to know what to look for, and you'll probably be a little bit more aware of your surroundings than if you go out there on day one doing the same thing and you fly over the brow of a hill and you suddenly realise that the piste ends and has a dog leg to the left. You're going to wish you'd had a look at that beforehand. So,
yeah, I've been on a motorbike and thought that sometimes.
there you go.
I guess most groups are a mix of skiers and snowboarders. Have you got any experience of what would be a good resort for a group like that?
Yeah, I think really it's less about the mix of people, but more about first of all, what level of ability everybody has. You'll find that in most magazines that you'll pick up, that are showing you where to go on holiday, so your holiday brochures, they'll have a certain level of information about what grades of slope are available in the resort and how many there are. So the first thing you want to do is always look to go somewhere that meets the needs of the weakest individual of the group, and I mean that in the best possible way. If you've got someone in there who's a beginner, it's no good going to a resort where there are very few beginner slopes, because that will immediately limit them, and it will also mean that they might be encouraged to go on something that's beyond their ability, irrespective of whether they're a skier or snowboarder. The best course of action would be to find a resort that is most suited to your less experienced member, and then make sure that there is a provision in there for people who are more experienced. So a couple of red runs and black runs, and you'll find that the runs are graded in colour. So green would be your beginner run, blue for the slightly more experienced, so your early intermediates, reds for your intermediates to advance, and blacks for those people who've got the confidence to go beyond the red runs and find something a little bit more steeper, so your expert skiers.
We mentioned about having exercise and making sure your joints are ready, but would you say you're best off going to somewhere like Snow Zone here and having a few hours before you go away?
Yes. The reason for that, there's 2 very good reasons. One of which is, when you first go to a resort, there's a lot of stuff to learn in a very short space of time. Now, you've paid a lot of money, I'd assume, to go out and do a ski and snowboard holiday. That can really be wasted if you're going to spend the first 3 days on a nursery slope out there. What's more is you can't always tell the weather conditions when you go out. So you might turn up in the resort, find that the snow quality or the weather is so bad, then in the first couple of days you really can't move off the nursery slopes. You're stuck there. By coming to an environment like Snow Zone or any of the UK snow domes, what it allows you to do is to go out and learn the basics, to get a fundamental understanding of how the kit works, to get to a stage where you're even capable of skiing beyond the nursery slopes and onto the intermediate runs on your first afternoon. And what that really means is that you've taken away that limiting factor of your experience and your ability on the first day, and it allows you to move from the nursery slopes up into the wider resort. Now, if you're going with friends as well that have already skied, that alone will help you to go and meet them for lunch, for example, on the first day, or meet them for drinks in the afternoon bars that are actually up on the mountain. And that is it's a really big deal for a lot of people. But also, if you're investing a great deal of money, there's no point wasting that money then on spending it in the nursery slopes in the nursery area for the first couple of days of your holiday. You really want to be out there experiencing the environment. So this preparation that we do, it's a great way of preparing yourself for your holiday, but it's also a great way of making sure that this sport is for you and that it's something you're going to enjoy and get the most out of. Not to mention the fact that if you come to Snow Zone here, it's always going to be professional tuition from an English-speaking instructor who is probably a UK citizen who has English as their mother tongue. And that as well really helped, because sometimes you'll go away on holiday and you'll find that your instructor abroad might not speak English. They might be trying to explain things that they can't necessarily do so fluidly because English isn't their mother tongue. So that in itself gives you a massive advantage, because you'll have a good understanding of what they're trying to communicate to you just by having a basic knowledge that you've learned in the UK. Not to mention the fact that actually in a UK snow day you can get to an incredibly high level of competency. It's unbelievable what you can actually achieve here, and you'll find that James Woods, as I mentioned earlier, the UK's #1 skier, he is capable now of winning world championships, but he's done so by learning, in the UK at Sheffield Ski Village and at Snow Zone in Leeds. So that itself has really helped us to kind of, boost our position in the UK, because it's something that's achievable to become a world champion out of an indoor centre, which is phenomenal.
So you don't have to go on the nursery slopes when you get there. How many hours work do you need to put in the UK place?
I would say in the UK you really want to aim to put in 7 or 8 hours, but everybody's different, and I think it's worth noting that some people might take a little bit longer to acquire the skills and others might do it in a much shorter time as well. The most important thing that people forget is that it's not like a course in computers or IT or anything like that, where you would turn up and do a session, go home and revise, do a session, go home and revise. What you actually have to do is acquire a skill. And much like learning to walk as a child or anything like that, it may take some time and some repetition of movements and some practice. So book yourself in for a course, but then don't have too much in the way of expectations on yourself and how quickly you actually acquire the skills. Your instructor will help you move forwards at an appropriate pace. But it's worth bearing in mind that everybody's different, and even in a group of 10, there will be 10 individual rates of learning in there. The instructor's role is to meet your individual needs and to facilitate that process so that you can gently move towards your goals in a very, very safe manner.
Join DJ Escudero for My Latinesque Show on Seclo Sounds every Saturday from 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. For everything cool and hot, Latin and local, it's Seclo Sounds with DJ Escudero. Para todo cool y caliente, latino y local, escucha a DJ Escudero en Seclo Sounds.
What services do you offer here, and can you teach tricks as well?
Right, we offer a full range of pathways from learning from absolute zero, so when you know absolutely nothing, right up to being a British freestyle competitor or a racer or even an instructor. So we can provide a pathway from nothing right up to the top end of the sport, and our instructors are really well tuned at how to get the most out of their individuals and make them into a situation where they have access to be able to move through the pathway. So for us, it's all about being able to provide a journey from learning absolutely nothing right up to mastering the mountains, to being able to ski the different areas of the mountain or board the different areas of the mountain. Today, for example, we have moguls out, which is what you'll find in the off-piste after a couple of days of it being skied, the big lumps in the snow, or bumps as they're also named. And we're training those. We did some coaching sessions with those last night. And then on Thursday and Fridays we have freestyle nights, so that's when we have all of our jumps out and our rails out. We regularly run sessions where we'll put a coach out on a Thursday night. We do it where you can book in to have an introduction to freestyle, or even get coached through some of the more advanced tricks as well. And our coaches are active within that market as well, so they'll be out doing competitions themselves, and they are performing to a very high level themselves. So it's great really to have people who are developing themselves, then coaching you and facilitating your development in those areas. On the racing side as well, we do a lot of ski racing, so if you're interested in doing ski racing, we can put you in touch with the right people. And the other thing that we do as well, we provide a link between us and Disability Snowsport UK. So anybody who is interested in joining snow sports, who may have a disability or some additional learning needs, we can also facilitate that as well. So there's really no excuses. Anybody can be involved in the sport, and you can learn from 3 years old if you're a skier, right up to 103 if you want to. It's all about whether or not you've got the level of fitness, and we will do everything we can to meet those needs. And we're just a conversation away from getting you out there on the slopes.
Do you offer trial sessions for people so they can just try for a few hours to see if they're going to like it or not? And how much would that cost?
We do. We offer what we call our level 1, which is our introductory course. Now that's an hour and a half. But actually 60 minutes of that is spent on snow, and the other half an hour is spending time getting people ready for the lesson, showing them how the kit works, how to put it all on, and really to make sure that the 15 minutes before the lesson and the 15 minutes after the snow period, I should say, it's there to help you kind of get ready and debrief of the session as well. Now, the reason we do that session for an hour and a half is because there's so much information to deliver during that first session. We felt that just adding that extra half an hour, giving people a little bit more time with their instructor off snow to help go through all that information. From my point of view, that really is your taster session, because it's an opportunity to come out and find out whether or not this sport is for you and whether you feel you can really carry on with it and you want to achieve it. The only thing I will say about that is that it is still very much the early stages, and a lot of people walk away from this session thinking, wow, I really enjoyed that, but what's next? And for me, it's what's next that's the most engaging part of it. We had to get through a certain amount of basic information during the level 1, during the initial course. But actually, at the level 2, that's when you start learning to turn, change direction, and actually having some control over what you do and where you want to go on your skis and board. And that's when it really starts to become exciting. So what I would say to anybody who wants to try it, I would say don't just come and do a level 1, but come and do a level 1 and a level 2. It gives you a really good snapshot of what you're looking to do and how you're going to achieve it, and also takes you to a level where you might walk away from the session feeling a sense of pride and achievement in what you've done. And that will really help you to see skiing and snowboarding for what it really is.
Rough cost for doing level 1 and 2? You're listening to the John Guinn Travel Show on seclosounds.org. You can contact the show via Twitter at holiday_hut.
So level 1, the cost is $29.99 to come in, and that includes all of your equipment hire as well for your hard goods. And obviously we'd ask people to make sure that they've got the appropriate clothing on, and if they don't, we can hire that additionally as well. But at the moment, until the end of August, we're running 50% off the level 1. All you need to do is quote lesson 50 if you book online at www.snowzoneuk.com, or if you phone through as well. We'll be able to take 50% off that cost until the end of August. So it's an incredibly cheap way of getting into the sport and giving it a try.
Is that booking before the end of August, or is that the lesson before the end of August?
That's the lesson before the end of August, yeah.
You mentioned that people can start skiing when they're from the age of 3, but what would be the best time for a child to learn, and what can you offer?
Well, for us, we take our children in skiing at 3 years old, and we take our snowboarders at 7 years old. The best time is obviously when they are a child. And this autumn we have our very, very new and well-designed product called our Snow Academy. Now, this is the first time we've ever offered something like this, and actually it's a new product for the whole industry that we're doing. What we're going to be doing is allowing people to book term-by-term sessions for their child. We're going to close our nursery slopes on a Saturday and Sunday morning and have them only open to children on this session. The idea is to create an environment that's engaging and fun for kids, where we're going to put out lots of little tunnels and hoops and things for them to ski through to help aid their learning and engage them in that process. And they'll have the same instructor for the entirety of their school term. Now, with that, we're going to reward the children by working through something called their Snow Life badges. And those badges are designed to reward the kids as they take each step through the system. So they're an internationally recognised set of awards. And the idea is that children will be able to go with their badge and their certificate, and they'll be able to take it to a resort. And the people within that resort will recognise it as a level of competence. But also it should help the children to want to progress and inspire them through the system. And again, by having the same instructor for the whole term, they'll feel coached in that process. The great thing as well is that the kids will all be in the same ability group, so every child will be in a group of a similar or the same ability, and they'll all be working together towards a common goal. So the instructor will be setting up an environment where they can ski or snowboard towards the next level in the Snow Life badges. And again, as we move forward, we look to the future, we're hoping that this will help us identify the next British skiing and snowboarding talent. What we can then do is we can help them achieve great things and bring them through so they can be identified by the governing body, Snow Sport England, and that will help to get them into the sport at a competitive level. Now, the badges and the certificates They all work to, as I say, this international standard, and they're grouped into coloured stages. So much like your ski runs in the Alps, you've got your green, blue, red and black. And the black level, the one at the very top, that will be for your competitors and your children that have got to a stage where they're starting to compete in either freestyle or racing, and they've got to a level of competence where they may be a registered performer with the governing body, and they might now be starting to get identified by the governing body as potential talent in the industry. So for us, we really feel it starts on the 7th of September, our new Snow Academy. We feel this is an opportunity for us to shape UK snow sport for the future. And with the Winter Olympics coming in February next year, 2014 in Sochi in Russia, we feel this will really aid us to generate a pathway for British talent to be identified at a young age and supported through the system, and supported in an environment that is notoriously quite a costly environment when you're bringing children in. We feel we can drive that cost down, we can make it a much more effective environment for children to learn in, and actually reward them in their progress as well.
And that's from the autumn.
Yeah, so it starts actually on the 7th of September. We're taking bookings from the middle of the week, so bookings will start from the 21st of August for that. And it's a session that we feel has already had a great deal of interest from the public, so it's something that we feel is going to book up very quickly. And actually, we have a waiting list system in place there as well, so it's worth making that inquiry at this stage. We want to get to a stage where we can really try and facilitate the development of these children and support them in their journey through British snow sports, and maybe even, as we say, produce some of the next world champions out of this process.
You never know.
We hope.
And finally, you've already mentioned the website, but how can listeners find out more about your training?
The best way to do it is through the website, so it's www.snowzoneuk.com. In there you'll find all of the information you need to book. You can also search through lessons there, see what we offer. You can book online as well. And if you're not entirely sure with what you want to go for, then there's a number in the top corner that allows you to speak to a customer service operator. We'll be able to talk you through the products that we have and which one is the most appropriate for you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Simon.
Cool.
And now it's time for the travel news. Way back on the 24th of November 2012, I had Bob Gager from HMRC on as a guest. Now, Bob was talking about the duty-free limits. I had him on because it was Christmas shopping season. I wanted to make sure people didn't have a nasty shock when they came back into the Green Channel and got pulled over on a spot check. The reason I bring this up is because Jet2 have just announced new routes to America. They're special sightseeing trips from Leeds, Bradford, Newcastle International and Glasgow airports, and they're going to Boston, Toronto and New York. These have been launched as spring city breaks, but I thought I'd mention about Christmas city breaks at the same time. Don't go crazy when you go shopping in America, because there are limits to how much you can bring back before you have to pay duty and VAT. Do make sure you're aware of every limit there is from the stuff you're buying before you come back. You can get stuff confiscated from you if you are over the limit and you don't want to pay the extra money. And of course you're saying to everybody when you go through the Green Channel that you have nothing to declare, and if it's found out that you have, then there could be a spot of bother there too. So go onto the repay page of seclosounds.org, search out the John Guinn Travel Show for the 24th of November 2012, have a listen to Bob Gager's interview and find out what the limits are, so make sure you don't have any nasty shocks when you come back from your holiday. Well, thanks for listening again, dear listener. Hopefully you've learned lots now about Botswana and snowboarding and skiing. The repay page I mentioned on seclosounds.org isn't just for the show on the 24th of November. Every show I've done over the last year is available via that page. Have a look. I've covered loads of destinations now and travel ideas. There could be something there for you which you've not noticed before. So please join me next time on the John Guinn Travel Show on seclosounds.org.
Take it hip to hip. MK Pulse proudly sponsors Seclo Sounds. MK Pulse is Milton Keynes' local magazine, bringing helpful information on food, health, fashion, money, travel, culture, and much more to 66,000 readers every month. Plus news, views, and what's on from around the city. If it's happening in Milton Keynes, it's in MK Pulse, and it's available online at www.mkpulse.co.uk. MK Pulse and Seclo Sounds, the heart and soul of the city.